Yeah, the community connection, reaching out so far, linking minds and sharing insights, shining like a star. From the leaders to the learners, every voice can grow, planting seeds of understanding, watch the knowledge flow.
Everybody, welcome to the Community Connection. We have with us a powerhouse, someone whose work I think is hitting education like an atomic bomb. His most recent book was endorsed by Hugh Grant and Jonathan Haidt. We will talk about that in a little bit. But everyone, welcome to the Community Connection, Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. Jared, welcome.
Hello. Thank you all so much for having me on. This will be great. I'm just going to follow your lead on all of this.
So, Jared, about 20 years ago, one of my first jobs in education, I was an ITRT, they called it Instructional Technology Resource Teacher. The year I started it, it was the first year they had created that position. And I loved it. I loved the job. I loved it. I was so excited. I was going to infuse technology as it was an elementary school, infuse technology in everything we did. And like no joke, back then, again, like 2006, I was thinking, I was in my computer lab, and I was thinking in 20 years from now, technology is going to transform completely what schools look like. I was so excited. I was so excited. Like, I can't wait for that time. I know it's going to happen. Kids are just going to go and blossom and thrive, and it's going to look so different. 2026, I am still waiting for that change to arrive. Sound familiar?
Hey, that's welcome to the party. I think you're absolutely right, man. 20, 25 years ago, it was all promise and we didn't know what to expect. And I give us all the credit in the world for trying and for playing things. But I think just like anything, if technology would have only existed in the classroom, we may have been able to turn it into the best tool we ever had. But the second technology entered the home, and more importantly, the pocket, it stopped being a learning tool. And now we were just fighting an uphill battle just to get some semblance of learning from a machine kids no longer thought was a learning machine. Same thing happened with the TV. The guy who invented the TV, Philo T. Farnsworth,
Farnsworth, yeah.
he wanted it in classrooms. He thought this was going to bring everyone to the world, and it probably would have, until it entered the home and became a tool for advertising and consumption. At that point, he said, "No, don't. It's not no longer a learning tool." He disowned his own tool. I don't allow it in my own house. I think the same thing happened here. Is once the world sneaks in and the tool does something else, now we got to ask: is it still our tool, or are we now making a kind of a bit of an error here?
Great question. So before we get into the digital delusion, I'd love to get in some of your background. Erik, kick us off. And
All
Erik, I
right.
want to thank Erik Francis for being here. Erik is a guest co-host, Maverick Education, expert on DOK, depth of knowledge, for you few who don't know what DOK is. Erik, go ahead and kick us off.
Thanks. Thanks so much. And Jared, thank you for being here. It's okay. I call you Jared, not that you want
Of course,
All
absolutely.
right. Cool, cool.
I wish you
So,
said no. I wish you said no. Dr.
no,
Cooney
call me Dr.
every
Horvath.
time.
So,
Dr. Horvath for the rest
yeah,
of the no, absolutely no. I am
I don't
Jared.
have my doctorate. I always say like I want to be like Professor F or something like that to have that kind of like superhero name, or Dr. Francis, you know. So, and it's funny because people
Dr.
call me,
J. That's what I'm gonna go with from now
there
on.
you go. Well, I think that might be taken now.
Oh, I'm seeing copyright, copyright.
All right. Well, first of all, thank you for being here. It's really a pleasure to meet you. I've been watching your videos. I've been listening to you. I read your book. Huge fan. I just got to tell you that. Very respect your
you.
work a lot. But what I want to know is this, is that you work both as a teacher and also as a neuroscientist. What first revealed to you the gap between brain research and also classroom decision making?
Believe it or not, so I there was a book when I was still teaching called "The Brain That Changes Itself" by Norman Doidge. I don't know if you guys have read that one. It's still I consider it still probably the best pop sci book I ever read. That was the book that got me into neuroscience, and that's where I thought if I knew more about the brain, that's got to make me a better teacher. And so that was my move to go back, learn about the brain, bring that back to schools. What a lot of people don't know is I actually wrote a paper. So there was a paper written by a guy named Brewer back, I want to say in the 90s, maybe even in the 80s, called A Bridge Too Far, where he argued that the distance between neuroscience and pedagogy was so wide, it's a bridge too far, that neuroscience simply cannot at this time impact pedagogy, you will impact teaching in the classroom. And so one of my big goals was I was going to prove him wrong. I was going to be the guy to disprove Brewer and show here I can link the two. One of my first papers I wrote after getting my PhD was A Bridge Too Far Revisited, where I said Brewer didn't actually go far enough. I not only his argument was neuroscience and pedagogy were too far removed because we don't have enough knowledge yet. My argument is they're too far removed always and forever. At no point will brain science actually drive pedagogy. And a lot of people are shocked when I say that. But what it is brain science can help us better understand learning. And when you understand the learning process better, that can influence the pedagogical decisions you make. But by no means will the neuroscience itself ever tell us anything about teaching because we're in two completely different worlds. So I always say knowledge of brain science I thought was going to make me a better teacher. What it really did was just teach me more about learning, which may have followed on into making me a better teacher, but that's a big step right in the middle that I thought wouldn't exist.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So talk us through your career trajectory. You mentioned you have been in Australia. Now you're in Portland, Oregon.
I'm everywhere. No, so I was a filmmaker and then a tutor and then a teacher and then a neuroscientist. And then that's kind of been since then I call myself a translator now. Is basically once you go to academia, you can't really leave. There's always one more thing to do. So I always thought I'd be back in the classroom by now. But man, 18 years later, I'm still doing neuro. But what I get to do is I get to kind of be the bridge between the laboratory and the classroom as much as I can to say, look, all right, if we understand this about learning, what does that mean for us as teachers? What does that mean for our students when they're studying? What does that mean for parents who are helping kids with homework or coaches working with students? So I get to do the really fun job now of translating learning for educators in a way that gives them more agency control over their teaching. Because that's my big kind of rule with teachers. Never tell teachers how to teach. Nothing bothered me more than when somebody would come and tell me how to do my job, especially somebody who didn't even know my job. Hi, I'm a psychologist. Let me tell you how to teach. I'd be like, yeah. You tell me how to deal with patients. I'll tell you how to teach. That's my job. So I like to work with teachers because I never tell them how to do their job. We just focus 100% on learning. How does memory work? How does attention work? What is surface learning versus deep learning? And then when they filter that through their own expertise of teaching, that gives them better agency over the decisions they're making. And that's what I love. You don't got to tell a teacher how to teach, but the more knowledge they have, the more aligned they're going to make their practices with how people learn.
Erik?
That's great you say that. That's something I'm even trying to do with my work with DOK is that stop looking at how you're teaching and start focusing how the kids are learning. And it's not about you, it's about the kids. And that's something I'm actually saying, like, what does learning look like, sound like, and feel like? So one thing is, what is one misunderstanding about the brain and learning that still surprises you to this day?
That I still think there are a huge set of beliefs in kind of a mechanistic idea of how the brain works. That people are born with unique brains, and that's going to kind of funnel you down different paths of learning. And which really then says, as teachers, then we've got to differentiate and figure out who our learners, what are their specific styles or preferences. And at the end of the day, believe it or not, everyone learns exactly the same way. The thing about the brain is not that it comes in doing one thing, is that it's the most adaptable thing in the world. And that adaptation then drives the learning process for everyone in the same way. So people get really tripped out when I say that. I always say, look, everyone digests in the same way. Yeah, no one's got a problem with that. No one has 6 stomachs and chews cud. No one spits acid and absorbs nutrients. We all have one digestive system, which makes us human. Everyone breathes in the same way. Of course we do. No one has 10 lungs or anything else. Everyone learns the same way. It's a biological argument that says there is a biological process to learning. And if you understand that process, it will be the same whether you're 5 or 50 or science, math, it doesn't matter what's going on. Now, by all means, that it doesn't follow that that means we have to teach everyone the same way. So go back to digestion. We all digest the same way, but it doesn't mean we can all eat the same things. What we put through the system might change. We all breathe the same way, but some people might smoke, some people vape, some people don't. So if you've got like a kid who is blind, say, you can't show that kid a picture and expect him to learn. We need a different way to get input, to get information into the system. but the system itself stays exactly the same. What is surface learning? How is it instantiated? How is it adapted? How is it transferred? That all stays the same. So the more you can focus on the process, then it makes all these kind of patterns a little easier.
So why do we keep feeding kids unhealthy food, metaphorically?
Because it feels good. We were having this
Everyone like
conversation this
McDonald's?
weekend. We're in a world that is all about ease and frictionlessness. We just want to feel good and calm and safe. And anytime our kid struggles, we think that must be a bad thing. Calm down, let's feel good again. And so it feels good to give people what they want. But ease has never been the defining characteristic of learning. Learning is not easy. The friction is the learning. If you're not
Yep.
uncomfortable, you're not doing it. And so I think there's a cultural desire to make the world as easy as possible. And that just doesn't gel with how learning works. And so I think that's why sometimes we might pick a pedagogy that's not best aligned with learning.
It's funny when you say that because, you say the terms productive struggle and creative frustration. Everyone
Yeah.
pays attention to the nouns, struggle and frustration. They don't pay attention to the adjectives, which is creative and productive. And that
Desirable difficulties. Difficulties,
right.
no, desirable. They're useful. Exactly. You nailed it.
Well, it's also interesting because there's this confusion between what is considered easy and what's considered simple, and they're not the same
Mm.
thing. Like I talk about this a lot. I say there's a difficulty between difficulty and demand. Difficulty is either easy or hard based upon it could be the number of items you're given, it can be amount of time you have, it's your capability and confidence to do it.
Yeah.
That something that's hard can be made easier. But something that's simple or something that's complex or involved or extensive, it stays the same. Doesn't matter who you are or even how much you work with it. It's always
Yeah.
either going to be simple, which is just give me the answer, or
Right.
complex. Okay, now I have to use some processing, or involved. I got to delve deep or extensive and make the connections. So it's really great you say that because I think that's what a lot of times the AI masks is that people think that it's taking what's complex and making it simple. No, it's still complex, but it's putting in an easy output.
Easy.
You still got to think about what it's giving you. I mean, that's something I'm even having in my work. We were talking about it off air. We'll just talk about the behind the scenes with it too. Is that people think they can plug in a standard into AI and it'll tell you the depth of knowledge level. It'll give it you these items and it will do all these things and give it to you immediately. But
Yeah.
how accurate is it? I always ask, what's your
Yeah.
knowledge source?
And that when it comes to AI, I always say you can only work down with AI. Whatever you bring to AI is as far as you're ever going to get with it. You can't
Mhm.
go up with AI. So exactly that. You plug a bunch of things into AI, it spits out something. If you're an expert, you can immediately vet it, think about it, adapt it, go, yep, this is right, this is wrong, that's nonsense. Oh, that's exactly what I needed. But if you don't know any better, it looks that's its power. It looks incredible to people who
Mhm.
don't know better. So like me,
Right.
I don't know anything about cars. So if I ask it anything about cars, it looks like a genius because to me it is. I don't know if it's right or wrong. It just looks. But as soon as I ask it anything about the brain, I'm like, whoa, you ain't even in the
Mhm.
ballpark with half the stuff you're saying now. So it
Right.
only looks good in the situations you don't know more about. So that's why you can only use AI where you're at and below. Anything above it, it's like praying to God. It's hope and a prayer, copy paste, and hopefully it's right. You don't know, they don't know.
Mhm.
What
So Jared, I want to.
go back to I think you made a good point too about surface learning and deep learning, right?
Mhm.
So surface learning is basically the formation of semantic memories. So if you wanted to simplify that, you could say it's the accumulation of knowledge, of facts. Deep learning is the organization and structure of those facts into coherent concepts, into unified wholes that can bend, move across context. It's funny, I always say that if I had to sum up deep learning in a single word, that word would be thinking. Believe it or not, at the surface, you don't need a ton of thinking. You just need a ton of experience, repetition, exposure. Cool.
Mhm.
Deep learning basically begins by saying, you got all this stuff, the heck you going to do with it? And that
Mhm.
is the one thing that most people use these tools to outsource is thinking. So, and especially AI. AI does nothing but think for you. And anyone who says, "Oh, you could ask AI to ask you questions," yeah, if you know the answers already. Otherwise, you're at the whim of what the heck it's going to ask you, and it could be completely wrong. So I love that thinking is how we start to move deep, and anything that kind of circumvents or outsources thinking, that's where stunting development starts to really come in.
So I think we'll talk more about AI. My usual co-host and I, Nathaniel, we have presented different opinions on AI. He
Mhm.
will call me an old man for not embracing AI quick enough. Um, and he'll say, as many do, it's just a tool, Worcester. It's just a tool, like a calculator. It's the same thing. Would you be against kids having a calculator? And I say, I don't think it's the same thing. But Jared, can you elaborate on a better answer for people who say AI is just like a calculator? It's the same thing. Are you against kids using calculators, or are you against kids using this tool?
Yes, and yes. No, so here's what you gotta. The people who say AI is just a tool are the same people who, out of the other side of their mouth, say AI is going to revolutionize the world. It's the greatest thing since fire. So, mate, what is it? Is it revolutionary or is it just a tool? It
Hmm.
can't be both. You can't have your
Right.
cake and eat it too in this situation. And the big difference is basically AI is generation. It's generative. It creates things. A calculator does not create anything. A bicycle doesn't create a dang thing. AI by its nature will create. That's what makes it a completely different category or class of tools. At which case you can then say, yeah, but it is still just a tool. But then you forget every tool comes embedded with a worldview. And when you use that tool, you have to now assume that worldview. So think about a hammer, right? As soon as you get a hammer, you're going to start looking for something to hit. Why? Hammer's just a tool, but it organizes the world in a very specific way that says these things are important, these things are not.
Mhm.
Striking force is more important than torque or turn. Every tool has a worldview in it. There is no such thing as a neutral or inert tool. So I think one of the better questions you can ask about AI is not how should we use it or when is it good to use? It's what is the worldview of AI? The tool itself, what does that say about the world, how it is structured, and when you use it, how does that determine what questions you're allowed to ask, what answers are meaningful, and what kind of disappears in that process as well? So, yeah, there is no such thing as a tool. But I will say this as well, your kids shouldn't be using a calculator until they learn how to do math.
Mhm.
It's a tool for offloading a process. So you do research. Kids who learn math using a computer always outperform kids who don't use a calculator, excuse me, a calculator to learn
Yep.
math. So long as they have access to their calculator. As
Right.
soon as you take their calculator away, they tank. Why?
Yep.
Because they weren't learning math. They were learning how to manipulate a tool to pump out answers. That is a completely different skill set. So if you want your kids to know math, do not use a calculator. It isn't just a tool. It will redefine what thinking means.
My
Do you think?
first year that I taught in Slovakia. I'm not saying they have no calculators in Slovakia. I'm sure they have plenty, but the students did have to do all of this computation by hand. When I came
Yeah.
over to the States, we didn't do that. We just did calculators. So like you said, their depth and knowledge was so much more was so deeper. It was so much more deep
Yeah.
than the students I had here. Like you said, if I took away my students in the States, their calculator, they were clueless. They had no idea how to do these things. My Slovak students, they knew all of this stuff to a very in-depth level.
And so when people say you kids can use AI to write an essay, yeah, yes, they can. But what they will learn to do is use a tool to write an essay. What they're not learning how to do is write an essay,
Right.
structure an idea, turn thoughts into comprehensible language. That is a different skill set that this takes away. Now, as an adult, use it away. That's what I always say. AI and most digital tools, I would argue, were created for experts to do less work. I
Hmm.
am really good at statistics. I just don't feel like spending the next 2 hours cramming these numbers. So I use technology to outsource, offload that work. But it only works because I can vet it immediately. Like we were talking about, Eric, is when it pumps out a number, because of my knowledge, I can go, yep, that's correct. Or, oh, no, that's wrong. Did I type in something wrong? Something is wonky here. But the tools we use as experts to make our jobs easier are not the tools a novice should use to learn how to become an expert.
Yep.
When they use those tools, they do not learn the craft, they do not learn the skill, they simply learn how to output. And that is a different thing. And they will never reach the same level we will hit because we're not using it to make the material, we're using it to make the material easier for us as we go on to other stuff.
Eric?
And quicker. See, and
Yeah.
that's the thing. Would you say basically every time the technology gets smarter, we need to think deeper in our learning? That one of the things with teachers, what they seem to not realize that we're living in a world, and we've been living in this world probably since like the late 90s, 2000s with the saturation of Google. We're living in a world where answers come free. And for the first time ever, when we were growing up, we're part of the same generation. We got our answers from three places: the textbook, our teachers, and our parents. And maybe four if we had the Encyclopedia Britannica. So,
That was I was gonna say. I had that one on my
yeah.
shelf. Yep.
Well, I actually saw one. I was in a used bookstore the other day, and I had kids like, so I heard a kid go, "Mom, what's that?" So yeah, it's kind of like looking at the
Next to the old
payphone.
handheld telephones, and like, whoa,
Well, my kids
handset?
went to Disneyland and they still have payphones there. My dad was like, my kids were like, "Dad, what's that?" And I go, "It's a payphone." Like, what do you have to do? You have to put money in. They go, "Are you serious? You had to have to do that?" So, but that's the thing, isn't the thing like we're not teaching. It seems we learn the answers, and that's how we grew up. But now we're living in a world where answers come free. I could Google it and I can get whatever answer I want. Same
Yeah.
with the calculator. I can go in a calculator and get whatever answer I want. Now AI can basically explain to me in a language. So shouldn't we in schools be teaching these kids how to think critically about the information that they're given? And even if we had to match and say, okay, it's not what 2 + 2 = 4, it's how do you use addition to get that number? Because if I know that, I can add any problem. And there's also that whole thing about memorizing multiplication facts. Is it that
Yeah.
you need to memorize the facts because the calculators can give it to us, or do you need to understand the patterns? So when I get more complex multiplication, I know how
But
to
what we
solve.
see, no, you're spot on, is what we see is the two are inseparable. A lot
Right.
of people, let's stick with the calculator metaphor. A lot of people think human beings are like calculators. So a calculator works by, on one side, it's got skills or
Mhm.
processes or abilities, addition, multiplication, division, cool. On the other side, it's got knowledge, information, data, numbers. So a calculator works by saying, I've got skills here and data here. And so long as I've got a skill here, then it doesn't matter what data you throw at me. I can use my skill just fine because they're totally dissociable. So you can
Mhm.
type in 321 plus 594 plus 682 plus, doesn't matter what you put in, I can use my skill. Human beings do not work like calculators. In
Mhm.
human beings, all of our skills are intimately tied to the information we have to use that skill with. The two are inseparable. So, the best way to kind of think of this, if you had to tattoo something on your forehead, higher order thinking skills emerge from lower order knowledge. The more
Mhm.
you know, the more creative you can be. The more
Mhm.
facts you know, the more critical you can develop. In fact, when you look at knowledge tests, like people say, oh, the Asian countries always outperform the Western countries on PISA and TIMS and all these because they just memorize facts. Give all those countries a creativity test. Guess who still outperforms all Western countries? The Asian
Mhm.
countries. Why? Because the more knowledge you have, the more creative you can be. So now when
Mhm.
people are like, oh, you can just use AI to access the fact and now we can think deeper about it. No, you can't. You can only
Mhm.
start thinking deeper about facts once they are embedded
Yes.
within your biology.
Right.
I'd like to, so if we just take a look at like creativity, right? And this is I'm using creativity just as an example, but this is the same for all higher order thinking skills. An estimated 80 to 90% of all your creative thinking will happen when you stop paying attention. What happens is when you step away from a question or a problem, your biology subconsciously does a whole ton of work, mixing and matching ideas, saying, oh, you forgot about this. Oh, this was something. That's why if you go to bed with a problem, you will wake up with a solution. You come up with your best ideas in the shower when you're doing nothing because your biology does work subconsciously that you are not a part of. But the only thing your biology can work with is information it has embedded within it. Your biology subconsciously can't ask Google, hey, what's the answer to this? So if you haven't embedded it, that's not going to be a part of your deep creativity. Sorry, that's not going to be a part of your deep critical thinking. So believe it or
Mhm.
not, The foundation of all higher order stuff is lower order knowledge. So when we use tools, technology to offload the first part of learning, generation of knowledge and facts, that will
Mhm.
stunt or completely eliminate anything beyond that stage. You will not heighten creativity. You will basically cut it off at the knees.
So
Right.
sometimes we hear think yeah, we want students to think like a scientist. We want them to think like a writer, think like a historian. And my usual argument is all of those people you just mentioned, they know things. They have a knowledge base. You can't think like a scientist if you don't know basic science, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Novice, if you had to differentiate novice versus expert learning, novice learning is the accumulation of isolated bits and you cohere them into full concepts.
Mhm.
Experts are the complete other way around. We start with full concepts and we
Mhm.
use those to make sense of new isolated bits. So when you're like, hey, here's a novice, they need to think like an expert, think like a scientist, think like a novelist. You literally cannot at that stage
Right.
because you are in a stage where you're still accumulating isolated bits and you're trying to figure out how they cohere together. Only once you have that process locked down can you now flip and start to use your coherence to make sense of new things. So what does that mean about that? Oh, that fits into this concept. Oh, that now, oh, I got to change this concept to account for that. So you've got to do the work to get to the stage. This is going to sound mean, but I always say you have to earn creativity. You have
Mhm,
to earn critical thinking. And
mhm,
realistically, if the computer does nothing but stunt surface level thinking, you have to earn the right to use tech.
mhm.
When you reach a certain stage of your learning development, that is when these tools will start to become meaningful for you. But at the beginning is not that time. And when you're a novice, that is not you. You're not ready to do that stuff. It's why we haven't had a no. And I'm not saying kids can't be creative. It's just if you look at creativity and critical thinking, we redefine those terms as people get older because we genuinely don't think kids are creative. We think they are highly imaginative,
Mhm.
but like I always say, like if you play a game with a 5-year old, and we used to do this kind of creativity game, right? Here's an object. How many ways can you use this object? So give a kid a brick. Say you have 2 minutes. How many ways can you use a brick? A kid I worked with once said, "Hey, I can throw that in the air to attract a UFO." That's the cutest thing I ever heard. That is highly creative. When a 5-year old says it, if a 40-year-old man at a job interview says, I think you could throw a brick in the air to attract a UFO, it's not creative anymore. It's
Right.
nuts. It's silly.
Yes.
Because as we grow up, we're looking for more from creativity. It's not enough just to be original. You've now got to be original and effective. It has to solve a problem. Your originality has to actually have some sort of validity to it. So I'm not saying kids aren't creative. I'm saying if you want the deep creativity where you are answering actual questions or asking meaningful questions, there's a whole lot of front work you got to do to get to that stage.
Yep. Speaking of stunting, so great book. Everybody watching, grab this, read it cover to cover. It is phenomenal. It is eye-opening. It's a great book. In
Thank
the
you.
very, I think the very first page, you talk about a cognitive difference that you discovered. I believe you testified to Congress about this. It's the
Yeah. Oh,
big,
I didn't.
it's like the big headline of the book. What is it?
It's the first sentence of the book. Our children are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. And it's the most depressing thing in the world, but I don't know any other way around it except you got to say it. So in every measure since we've really been recording human cognitive skills and development and ability, every generation outperforms their parents. Even on something like IQ, which a lot of people think IQ is genetic or inborn. Nope, every generation outperforms their parents by about 6 IQ points. This has been happening for over 100 years. Gen Z is the first generation to go down. They have lower general IQ than we do. We've never seen an IQ drop, but there it is. It's happening now. They have lower attention. They have lower literacy. They have lower numeracy. Now, not the lowest. Some people have said so the lowest in history. No, 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 no. They're lower than us. They're equivalent to our parents. So maybe Gen X into baby boomers at the end of that. But they're now going down. We needed them up here.
Mhm.
If we keep in this direction, yeah, we're just going to keep going in the other way. Nothing against him. Doesn't mean you're a bad human being. It just means we're not cutting your cognitive teeth like we would expect to in school. And the biggest kind of weirdest aspect of this whole thing, by the way, people don't believe me, but I like working memory limit. We thought working memory limit was just a hard limit of biology. If for 150,000 years, what it is what it is. That will never change. No, Gen Z has a lower working memory limit than millennials do. So even like things that we thought were untouchable are
Yep.
somehow sloping down. And we always said, look, the only reason every generation is outperforming their parents cognitively is because every generation goes to more school. Every generation spends a couple more years in school than their parents. Those
Mhm.
extra years boost your cognition. Congratulations. And that's the big question is Gen Z is in school longer than millennials are, yet they're going down. So what happened to decouple schooling from cognitive growth? And the only thing I can think of, we're not teaching wickedly differently. The schoolhouses themselves aren't different. The context looks the same. Kids are the same. Biology hasn't changed. It's the dang tools we're using in school. It was the surge of digital technology systematically seems to be leading to this massive kind of decline. So that's where I figured that book had to come in and say, can we suss this all out and then hopefully make better decisions kind of going forward?
Do you think the technology has made learning so multisensory? I mean, if you think about it, I always try to figure out, every generation, the technology is riding our brain. The television riding our brain, MTV riding our brain, reality TV riding our brain, the computer's riding our brain, the internet's riding our brain, social media. Now it's this. Do you think it's become, because I have this question, I have more of a former English teacher, and
Yeah.
I always wonder, why is it that kids would probably struggle with more classic literature than contemporary literature? And it's like the way Hawthorne wrote, the way Fitzgerald wrote was to a generation that did not have the multisensory technology. So do you think the technology is really what's impacting that deeper critical thinking? They're not looking at different cues that can get them to think critically. Because one of the things I even say to English teachers is that you can teach the literacy skills and the literacy application of literacy in movies.
Yeah.
One of the things I always say is this, is that if you want to teach foreshadowing and prediction in a book that's text, that's hard. But you show a kid the Avengers Age of Ultron and you see Captain America move for his hammer, and then by Endgame, he's picking it up, and you're asking that kid, okay, could he have always picked up the hammer? Would he basically become more worthy over the movies? How about if he always could pick up the hammer, but he chose not to make Thor feel? That's critical thinking. But a lot
Yeah.
of times people are like, it's still that old school, gotta read, no, it's this, it's gotta be that. What can we do to get these kids to think critically about the multi-sensory imagery and sounds that they're exposed to?
And I think there is a case to be made that television did rot a lot of our thinking, and that MTV did rot thinking, and video games does rot aspects of thinking. Trick to recognize was we were doing that at home. That was never what we were doing for the 6 to 8 hours we were in school. So we
Right.
were always buffering that home time with bad news for the next 8 hours. You don't have that escape, so you got to do something else. But
Right.
what is the big difference then today? And I think you're right. Every generation is going to have its own language. It has to. Just think of slang. Every generation of teenagers has to break language. That's how they learn to control language. So every generation has to have its own slang, its own medium of discussion. I got no problem with any of that.
Right.
What's different about today is twofold. One, it's highly individual. When we were all watching TV, we were all watching the same TV. You didn't have any say in it. It was 8:30 at night. Here are the 6 shows that are on. Pick one or go home.
Right.
Now you get to pick. You have a lot more agency over it. And because you have that agency over it, it's now highly individual. Instead of everyone watches Roseanne on a Thursday night, everyone watches something completely different on a Thursday night, which is now starting to differentiate. It's real hard to have critical discussions when we're not even looking at or discussing the same stuff. I don't know what you saw. You don't know what I saw. Cool. Best I can do is tell you, and hopefully you agree with me. The next level then is how is it actually being presented to us?
Mhm.
Back in the day, we had long form films. You could do in the late 90s, every film was about 3 hours, like Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption. We were pushing 245 into the
Okay.
3 hour limit. Everyone was fine with
Magnolia.
that. And
Yeah.
Magnolia. Oh, no, so few people know that. That is,
Oh,
if you Look at every single one of my book has So Now Then. That's my throw to back to Magnolia.
I
One of my
didn't know
favorite
that.
movies of all
I
time.
did not make that connection. Magnolia is great.
That
So,
that is where it
audience,
comes.
after you finish reading this, go watch Magnolia. One
Yeah.
one of my
I
one of my former students is like she started off she's in a movie that was streaming on Prime, and we talked about her
Yeah.
five favorites, and Magnolia and Shawshank were both in my top five.
I got you. And Braveheart. Hello. See,
That
there
was
it
on
is. So now then, I put that card in every
yep,
book I write. That's my Magnolia throw.
from
But
Magnolia. That's
that's
fantastic.
so. But now we have the attention economy, which basically says I can't get you to sit there for 3 hours to watch something because I won't make money. I'll only make X amount of money because you're looking at one movie. But if instead of one 3 hour movie, I can get you to watch two 90-minute movies, I can make a little bit more money. Say, instead of two 90-minute movies, why don't we do three 60-minute movies? I'll make a little bit more money. It's just been cutting so far to ensure we have ads in different kind of metrics that now the average attention span on a screen is around 43 seconds among teenagers. That's how much time you have, and then they're going to go on to the next thing. So the way the medium is now presenting things to kids, it's killing critical thinking because they just don't have the time to actually absorb anything for a long enough time span before they're like, go to the next thing. Someone just complained about movies on Netflix are now almost impossible to watch because they're just so dang recursive. They will say the same things 5, 6, 7 times in a row. Like, why are you doing that? And Netflix flat out said it's because we assume our audience is on cell phones and they're not going to actually be watching the movie. They're just going to be coming and going. So we got to make sure we hit the same points dozens of times. Otherwise, they won't know what's happening.
Mhm.
That's the next level. I think when we were all watching films, at least we still had a coherence of time and content together. Now it's highly individual and it is so short, real hard to think critically about a 30-second clip. So you just don't do it anymore. So that's another aspect of the way the tool is being used now and what it's used for is just not conducive to human learning or cognitive development. It's conducive to making money.
Yeah.
Jared,
We used to say,
I want to come back to that. I want to talk just about an overview of computers and technology in school and how it's going to transform learning. Did either of you watch Arrested Development?
Yeah,
yes.
heck yeah.
Okay, so there's a great, I looked right before this podcast. There's a great clip with Tobias and Lindsay, and they were talking about the marriage. And Lindsay says to Tobias, well, did it work for those people? Did this method, did it work for those people? Tobias, no, it never does. People somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us,
But it
right?
might.
It just reminded me of technology. It's like, has it ever worked? No, this hasn't worked.
But it
But maybe
might.
for us, it might work
This
for
is
us.
finally the time. Isn't that the
So is
biggest
it?
promissory? That's what I always say. The biggest argument edtech has is always promissory. If you go watch the trials going on right now in LA with Meta and Facebook Meta, whatever it's called now, watch any debate with like alpha school people versus learning scientists. The only thing they have to lean on is promise. They will admit, yeah, it hasn't worked yet, but it will. Give us 2 more years. If the next model is going to blow you out of the water. No, it's not. We just keep
Mhm.
cycling the same thing for 60 years now. We've had ICT in schools and we have the same effect again and again and again. We got to start rethinking. Maybe it's the tool. Maybe it's not the program. Maybe it's not. We just need one more update, one more
There we go.
patch.
That's going to do it.
It's that. Oh, we
Right.
finally made it. Now, or maybe it's just antithetical to how humans deeply learn and we got to rethink the tool.
Hmm. Hmm.
So would you advocate for removing all technology from schools? Where are you on that? I know you said before that
Oh,
you are not anti-technology, you're pro-learning. What
yeah.
does that mean? I know you've got some suggestions for parents and school leaders in your book. What would you advocate for in terms of technology in our classrooms?
A good rule of thumb, I'd say primary years, I've never heard a solid argument why kids would ever need to touch tech up till about grade 5. Some people say, well, the tests are now online, the national or state level tests are online. Cool. So what? All you need to do is have three 20-minute training sessions to help a kid understand how to access and press the buttons. They'll be just fine. It's learn it and then come here and apply it. You're going to be fine. But once we start getting up into middle and high school, that's where we have to really differentiate between curriculum and pedagogy.
Mhm.
Curriculum is what we teach, pedagogy is how we teach. I have no problem with technological pedagogical arguments. We need to teach kids how to code. Cool, that's coding class, that's curriculum. We need to teach kids how to use Excel. Cool, that's called Excel class, that's curriculum. The problem is that curricular argument has somehow morphed into a pedagogical argument. And instead
Mhm.
of people saying we need to teach about Excel, now people are saying we need to teach every class using Excel. Instead of saying we
Mhm.
need to teach about computers, people are saying we need to teach every class through a computer now. That's a pedagogical argument, and now you've made too big of a jump. And that's where ed tech, they always make the pedagogical argument. And I'm like, no, pull it back. If you think you need to have kids need to know about AI, cool, that's called AI class. 30 minutes every Monday, we do it over here. That does not interfere with what we do in gym class. That does not interfere with what we're doing in chemistry or math class or anything else. So I'm totally fine with teaching about tech. That's great. In
Yep.
order to teach about tech, you almost certainly need tech. So the next thing I'm just like, we have to go back to controlling the tech. Wood shop. Most schools have a wood shop with a jigsaw where kids can cut wood. I don't know of a single school where every single kid is given a jigsaw to carry around all day with them and take home with them as well. They
That's a good
realize, look, when we're using the tools, we use it in this context. So
Yep.
I'm the biggest advocate of just go back to the computer lab. Go back to controlling the tech. It's not that every kid has it all day, every day. It's a free for all. It's, yeah, that's where we do tech class. That's where we do home ec. That's where we do gym. So once we lock the technology back down, what that's going to do is that's going to help us differentiate curriculum and pedagogy. And that's going to help teachers think a little bit deeply. Now we've introduced friction. Right now, the computer with one-to-one laptops, every kid has a laptop. That's the go-to solution. It's all right, everyone pull out your laptop. Why? Because it's there. Why not? If
Mhm.
it's not there, now teachers, if I want to use technology, what do I have to do? I have to reserve the computer lab. I have to get my kids up, walk them across school. I'm going to lose 5 minutes there. Is it worth it? No, you know what? We'll just do it on a chalkboard here. Add a little friction, and now the decisions become a lot more deliberate on when we're going to use it versus not. Right now, it's just too easy to tap into it. We just got to take better control of it, and I think we're going to be fine. So no, it's not about getting rid of all tech. It is in primary years. I don't think an 8-year-old needs to see a computer. Why would they? It's a waste of their time. But as we get older and we start to produce, go to town.
Totally agree with you because it's the whole thing about even engagement. Eric, you've probably seen this in your district. We need to keep these kids engaged. We have a lot of kids on computers going bip, bop, boop, swipe left, swipe right, but are they getting educated? That's the big
Mhm.
question. And the other thing is, and Eric, I don't know if you hear this in your school. I hear this a lot of when I talk to teachers. They're not passing IXL, or according to iReady, they're saying this.
Mhm.
A lot of feelings, do you agree with this, that we're so over dependent even on the technology to say where the kids are in their learning from a data standpoint, that we're not even looking at, well, what is that item asking? Like when I go work with schools and we get the scores and they tell me they use some online platform, I'll throw out the names: NWA, Galileo. It's always this
Yeah.
online platform that you put it in, and it's either going to be a straightforward or a categorical assessment tool where they go basically, if they do well, they'll get a more challenging question. If not, they'll kind of stagnate or go right.
Yeah.
They get the results, but one of the things I always say is, did you look at the item? And I either get one or two things. Can we do that? Or we're not allowed to do that. And I'm like, how do you
Oh.
know why they got the score what they got if you don't even know what the item's asking? Because a lot of people even don't understand what standardized assessment, they're not going to have the item assess at the level of the standard. It's why it's called an assessment. It's a range. So how
Yeah.
closely did that kid hit it? Do you feel that when it comes to data, we're just getting it back and we're saying, okay, 40% of our kids are not proficient according to what this standardized digital assessment said, and we're not diving in to the depth we need to say, well, what did that item demand? Why did they respond? Why did if 60% of the kids did not get that correct, why did 50% answer with the wrong same answer? You
Yeah.
know? So
It's who's I forget who said it, but it's a maxim or an axiom. When the measure becomes the goal, it ceases to be an effective measure. And that's
mm,
basically what this is why are you only getting 70% on IXL? I need you to get 80%. Well, now we don't even know what we're doing anymore.
mm,
You know what this reminds me of is formative assessment. So most listeners will know we have summative assessment and formative.
mm,
Summative assessment was that thing you do at the end of the year. You get your one grade. You can't do anything about it. Off you go. This is a snapshot of how much you learned by this time at this moment. Formative are those little baby quizzes we're doing every day, all day, every like where are we at today to push to the next level. So the guy who coined the term formative assessment, Dylan William out of the UK,
mm,
he started doing research into why does formative assessment work? Why is it so powerful when it comes to learning? And what he found was the power of formative assessment has very little to do with the kid getting feedback on their performance. It has a lot more to do with the feedback that gives the teacher and how
mm,
the teacher now knows what to adapt to teach them the following day. So he no longer calls it formative assessment. He says, I wish I never would have used the term assessment. I just shove people the wrong way. He calls it responsive teaching. The
mm,
power of it is as the teacher, I created the question, I asked my kids to answer it, and based on their answers, that tells me how I have to adapt my teaching to make sure I can get you to the next level. It's all feedback to the teacher. So now when we use these online tools where the teachers don't even know what questions are being asked, don't know what kids are doing on which question, they just have a final summative 50%. What's the point of any of that? I can't
mm,
adapt my teaching for that. I can't help you. I don't know. It's completely circumvents the biggest driver of learning, which is the teacher's agency and adaptability based on knowledge of the students and where they're at. So that's
mm,
where I think the offloading of assessments, the offloading of lesson design, the offloading of class, offload any of that to tech, to AI, to LMS, you're basically telling the world we no longer need teachers because you are shooting yourself in your foot. You've now given away the one thing we are here to do. And that breaks my heart. So I'm 100% with you is no. You write the questions. And why do you write the questions? Because you know what you want your kids to know. If you don't know what you want your kids to know, don't quiz them. When people are like, how do I write a test? What do you want your kid? It's not magic. If you don't have a goal at the start of a lesson, what you want your kids to know by the end of that lesson,
mm.
back to the drawing board. That's like
Mhm.
step one of what we need to be answering as teachers. And I think we're just losing all that. You know what scares the daylights out of me though, Eric, was somebody brought this up the other day was we're kind of at a precipice. All the new teachers coming out of teacher college were raised on tech. The
Yes.
only learning they've ever done was on tech at schools. And so
Yeah.
that's their teaching. And so
Mhm.
the older teachers in these schools are looking at them going, it's not, we can't even talk to them about pedagogy because they don't know anything out of this. And they think this is good. They think this is what it's supposed to be like.
Yep.
So I think we're at where they made the point that if we don't get this fixed in the next 5 to 10 years, we might run out of time where all the old hats like us retire and all the teachers only know tech. And now everything will get redefined to what can tech do. And I have a sneaking suspicion that's like the golden dream of tech companies. Like that's
Definitely.
exactly where they want to end, where it's too late for you to turn back because you don't even know what you used to do. That's scary.
So, Jared, I'm going to ask you one more substantive question, and then I know we're getting towards the end. Then we'll close out with a couple of quickies.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
my question is going to be about the ed tech industry. But before I do that, I love what you mentioned about empathy and the importance of empathy between teachers and students. I love, love, love your metaphor with AI and how you mentioned something about if you create a machine to do exercise, right, you don't get stronger. That doesn't improve you. So I'm throwing out some of your greatest hits. I love that metaphor. I mentioned that to somebody else, give you credit. I think it's a great way to think about
Thank you.
AI. It's something else doing the work. You are not going to get any better for it. But the
Yeah.
question is, it's kind of looking at the impact and what's next and where things are going. I don't know, but I would guess that the education industry has deep pockets and a lot of money.
Mm,
I'm sure they're not huge fans of this message you are spreading.
mm.
So how do you face that pushback? What impact have you seen from your book? What do you think comes next?
I I'm shocked that the vast majority of feedback from the book has been it's been parents and teachers and administrators, superintendents who said, "Thank you." Like I felt it, but I didn't know. You've given me permission to say these things. I was right. Oh my goodness. So that's been wonderful, and I think what we're seeing is 9 states now have proposed bills on ed tech on basically, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're going to kill ed tech." I don't care about ed tech. The
Mhm.
bills are saying prove it first. The bills aren't saying we don't need any more ed tech. The bills are saying, cool, if you come with a program and you're going to put this in front of our kids, where's your evidence that your program boosts learning compared to methods we've been doing for the last 100 years? And so it's basically just building standards that says it's not the Wild West anymore. You can't just invent a program, sell it to LAUSD, and now every kid has to use it. By the way, did you read that this morning?
I saw that. Yes.
Could have seen that coming a mile away. Oh,
What
so
was that?
you're
What was
telling
that?
me? Oh, so the superintendent of LAUSD, the FBI raided his home because he had monetary ties with an ed tech AI company that he was funneling through LAUSD.
Mm.
Basically, and I promise you, keep an eye out. They will find in the next couple of weeks, they will find links between him and iReady as well. I promise you. This is just proof that the decisions they were making when it came to ed tech in a lot of schools have nothing to do with evidence, have nothing to do with learning, have nothing to do with efficacy. They were just cash grabs. There were ways to move money around. Because if you think about it, man, well, ed tech was promised to revolutionize education, to make it the creative miracle that it could always be. Get kids out of this drill and kill, boring thing we've been doing for 6 decades and open them up. What is technology good at? Drill and kill. The only time technology works is when it just shoves information at you and it drills and kills. That's the only benefit we've really ever seen. So all this promise is just going back to saying, hey, this is what works, which to me says more about learning than it does about technology. That, yeah, repetition, the slog, that's part of what we have to do to get there.
Mhm.
But I think you're right, is how are we going to get pushback from these companies? And by the way, I think Pearson and them, I think they're going to go back into textbooks. I think textbooks are
Mm.
coming back. They almost went away. Keep an eye. I think the whole textbook market is going to be swinging back pretty hard as people
Mhm.
move away because digital textbooks, we don't learn from them. It's just
Mhm.
stuff to
Yep.
us.
Yep.
It doesn't open us to pedagogy. It's just noise to us. But so the people pushing back against this bigger message, then they're really good at reading half of the argument and then going on, like going, well, yeah, but you didn't say. It's like I always say, the people I've had to talk to about the book, I'm like, imagine you read War and Peace and there was a typo on page 63 and you said, well, that whole book's bullshit.
Right.
Well, no, there are going to be issues worth talking about, but
Sure.
you can't use one small thing to then say everything is pointless. Don't pay attention
Right.
to it. But that's kind of their method right now. But beyond that, I'd say, look, they can't use data. Tech companies can no longer use data because the data is not in their favor. So they've lost that leg from their table to
Mhm.
stand on. They can't use mechanisms because the mechanisms of biological learning that we can outline that we know very well just do not gel with tech. So they've lost that leg of the table. The only leg of the table still standing, and I guess if there's 3 legs, it would have fallen over by now, but this leg is right in the middle, so it's holding it up, is promise, is hope, is
Yeah.
dream, is fear, is do you really want your kid not to be job ready? What are you talking about? When has a generation of people graduated from school not job ready? The only time we've seen it is Gen Z.
Yep.
Every generation has come out and we've been fine at work. Gen Z is the first generation to come out, and hiring managers are like, I'd rather hire a millennial and a Gen Xer for a tech job. So somehow
That's
all of this is making them less job ready for whether you care or not about that that's up for debate. But that's where I'm
that's
like,
so
guys,
funny you
what are we
say
doing
that.
here?
That's so funny you say that. I mean, interrupt, but when we
Yeah.
talk about even college and career readiness, not many people know that that's half of David Conley's pie. That you have college ready and career ready, but he had a whole other part that talked about job ready and work ready. And
Yeah,
job
yeah.
ready was, do you have the basic comprehension and communication to do your job independently? Okay. Work ready is, do you have the self-reliance and independence to do your job? Meaning that you have to get in. If you have an 8 to 5, you can't get in at 8:01 and you can't leave at 4:59. And if you go to your boss and say, I don't get it, This is not school, my friend. They're going to say, well,
Those
you,
sounds like things worth teaching.
yeah. And,
And
but what's really interesting is that that whole college and career readiness, people don't understand. It's a pie. And
yeah,
when it, you know, but if I got up on a pulpit as a policymaker and said, we need to make our kids, post-secondary ready, people are gonna go, huh, what? But you say, we need to make our kids college and career ready, we can get behind that, but we've never, ever been able to define what that is. So you're a movie guy. I always like to say my favorite line in Jaws is this, Martin, it's simple. You say barracuda, people go, huh, what? You say shark, we got a problem on the 4th of July. So when we put these things out there, we're getting half truths. Do you
yeah.
feel that's kind of the same kind of impression when you see all these people, especially all these educators, they're doing these grand keynotes, AI is a wonderful thing. They sound like Doug Henning from that old play Magic, if you remember that from Broadway. Magic's a wonderful thing.
No.
Do
Oh, I
you
haven't seen that one.
yeah, do you feel that they're giving that message without saying, yeah, but, and this is what you need to do? Because I have yet to see an AI
Yeah.
presentation that does not have the same narrative. There's no different narrative. AI is a wonderful thing. If you use this, if you use technology, this, your life will be beautiful.
It's all smoke and mirrors. That's been their
Yeah.
entire premise for decades. That's how the tech company works. Promise, 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 crash. Promise, 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 crash. It's the same pattern again and again. So with the AI thing specifically, anytime I go to an AI keynote,
Mhm.
it's the I'll ask two questions. I'll ask one, practically, how does that work in a classroom with 30 kids? Most of the time they can't tell you. If it's a teacher, they'll make up something. Two, I'll say, and where's the data that that's going to work? They don't
Mhm.
have any. So I said, so okay, I love your AI spiel. I love the promise. I'm never going to kill anyone's hope or faith. Dream as much as you want to. I have to live in the real world. um, Anecdote and hope is not enough. I need evidence because I got 30 kids tomorrow that I got to make sure are ready for this world ahead of them. So
Mhm.
it's as soon as that's anytime people talk, I could be with the Alpha School people. They could talk for 2 hours. The first thing that's going to come out of my mouth afterwards is, where's your evidence?
Mhm.
They don't have any. And that's got to be the bullet that puts them down. Is
Mhm.
they will demand I prove their tool is harming kids learning, and I can, but that should never have been the standard. It's
Right.
not give kids cigarettes, and when they start dying, we'll determine whether or not it's bad. It's don't give kids cigarettes until we know what the outcomes are going to be. And that's the big. So anytime someone talks AI, I'm like, sweet, just show me your data. Well, we don't have it yet. Then don't worry about it. Go back to the drawing board. Do not ask me to put something in front of my kids that you haven't tested, vetted, and I already figured out whether or not it's going to work. The other thing I ask about with ed tech or with AI specifically is it's when people, and you've seen them, it's the keynotes and the people who come up and say, we got to teach kids how to use AI right. You got to teach kids how to use AI. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I always say, dude, how old are you? I'm 36. Who taught you how to use AI? Well, no one. I learned it myself. Wow, how magically did you figure it out? K through 12 education is not here to teach kids how to use tools. We are not a tools-based system. We never have been. That's what an IT institute is. That's what apprenticeships do. That's what TAFE does. We are a general education. Our job is
Mhm.
not to teach kids how to do things. Our job is to teach kids how to think through knowledge so that they can now tackle anything that comes their way.
Mhm.
Adaptability comes with metacognition and awareness of the process. How do you
Mhm.
develop that? You develop that through a general K through 12 education. We're not teaching you history because I think you're going to be a historian. I'm not teaching you writing because I think you're going to be a novelist. Some will, but that's not the goal. I'm teaching you how to recognize patterns, think through knowledge. So now when you graduate, whatever the world throws your way, you can adapt to it easily. And that's
Right.
how these people learned AI at 36. It's because schools taught them how to learn. So you're
Mhm.
telling me I should stop teaching kids the very stuff that made it so you could give me this lecture today, and I should start teaching them something that you think is magical that might absolutely stunt them and make it so they can never make the argument you're making right now. That seems like a
Mhm.
lose-lose to me, mate.
But it might work for us.
But in
Jared, last
this
last two quick ones.
story,
Where can people find you to learn more about you?
Oh yeah, just look me up online, Jared Cooney Horvath. I have a YouTube, I have a Substack about the book, and our big website is lmeglobal.net. So learning made easy global.net. That's where we've got videos, we got everything I've written is on there. We've got programs if you want to dive into learning and how that all works. That's a big repository of stuff.
I also always ask, what words of inspiration do you have for our educators? I'm going to tweak that a little bit and just say, what words do you have for those principals or superintendents out there who are looking to modify or looking to know more about how they should use technology effectively?
Do it. If you want to learn more, start asking questions. I do not mean to plug my book, but The Digital Delusion. I've put as much as I can in there to help us kind of answer those questions. But if you're ready to kind of pull back, do it. We were talking about this. I was just with a bunch of schools recently, and one of the schools in the network is like the school. Everyone watches that school. And the principal, the head of that school said, well, we had a snow day yesterday, even though I didn't think we had to, but I was looking around, every other school was closing, so I thought we'd close as well. And everyone just kind of stopped in their track. They're like, wait, you were looking to us for cues? We're looking to you for cues. And he's like, no, I'm paying attention to what you're doing. I feel like it's the same thing with ed tech. Everyone is just looking at what everyone else is doing, thinking, oh, I guess that's what we got to do. Pull the trigger. If that guy would have said, nope, we're not having a snow day, all the other schools would have been sweet. And it was a sunny day. It would have been sweet.
Mhm.
Let's not have a snow day today. Someone's just got to pull that trigger and say, you know what? We're changing things here, and others will follow and pay attention. You're not going to lose enrollment. You're not going to lose students. There's a huge swath of parents who are begging for this to happen. And if you make it happen, they're coming to you. I promise. And can I leave with one other kind of idea
Sure.
here?
Mhm.
I've been thinking about this a lot. And I'm just going to pull some things out of my head here, so bear with me. The Roman aqueducts, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the Great Pyramids of Giza, the entire skyline of New York, 1920, the atom bomb, going to the moon and back. These are all things human beings did without computers. Now, to be fair, we did have when we went to the moon, we had a computer with less power than one of our singing birthday cards now. So we don't really count that. It was there, but we didn't really use that to make the mission or anything. When you remember, human beings are incredible. The amount of stuff we can do without computers is beyond what most of us accept. And we've just kind of crossed this line where we think human beings are nothing without tech. Like we are worse than these computers. Computers are a better version of us. And that's simply not true. So the more you can kind of tap into and remember the power of humanity, our creativity, everything we have done without these tools, taking them away is not going to stunt the next generation. It's going to help them reconnect with what it means to be deeply creative, to actually be innovative, not to assume that this tool will now define creativity because I can only go so far. It can do more than me. No, you are limitless. Human beings have so much ability, and we just got to keep reminding ourselves that what we can do without tech is endless. What we can do with tech is stunts us. We're now going to be basically locking our skills down to fit the machine. And I don't love that idea. So if you need some sort of encouragement or inspiration, just look to the past, man. The things we have done is out of this world.
I love that. So I was
Yeah.
thinking of two songs that I think encapsulate this. First, I think it's Cerebellus, where she says, I want to see you be brave. Right? So those
I do
questioning
not
tech,
know. I'm going to have to look that one up.
I want to see you be brave. I think that's Cerebellus. And finally, this isn't quite the song, but I think we need to stop the virtual insanity. Little Jamiroquai.
Oh,
Thank you, Erik
I
Francis.
like that.
Thank you, Erik Francis, for being my guest, my co-host here today. And we are so pleased again, Jared Cooney Horvath, to have you here talking about your fantastic, phenomenal, impactful, meaningful book, The Digital Delusion. Get everyone go out there and buy it. Thank you, everyone, for watching this episode of The Community Connection.
Yeah, the community connection, reaching out so